The sight of her own reflection in the cracked mirror told Rose Sullivan everything she needed to know about her worth in this world, at least according to every man who had ever claimed ownership of her. 22 years old, and she had been bartered, sold, and traded more times than she could count on both hands. Her father had given her to a rancher to settle a gambling debt when she was 16. That rancher traded her to a saloon owner in Santa Fe for a thoroughbred horse. The saloon owner lost her in a card game to a cattle baron who needed a cook for his ranch hands. And now, in the summer of 1878, she stood in a dusty room above a general store in Pinon, New Mexico, waiting to meet the man who had purchased her services for the next year. The door opened without a knock, and Rose kept her eyes down like she had learned to do. Submissiveness made the transitions easier. Fighting only brought bruises and hunger. "Look at me when I am talking to you," a rough voice commanded, though he had not yet spoken any actual words to her. Rose lifted her chin slowly, prepared to see another leering face, another man who saw her as nothing more than an object to be used. Instead, she found herself staring into a pair of stormy gray eyes that held something she did not recognize. The man stood perhaps 6 feet tall, lean and weathered by sun and wind, with dark hair that touched his collar and a jaw shadowed by stubble. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy: denim trousers, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, dusty boots, and a worn leather vest. A revolver hung at his hip, but his hands rested calmly at his sides. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Rose Sullivan, sir." Her own voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "My name is Fletcher Owens. I run a horse ranch about 10 miles north of here." He pulled out a chair from the small table in the room and gestured to it. "Sit down, Rose." She obeyed immediately, her hands folding in her lap. Fletcher remained standing, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable in a different way than she was accustomed to. Most men looked at her with hunger or contempt. This man looked at her as though he was trying to solve a puzzle. "I need to explain something to you," Fletcher said finally. "Ben Carter told me you were available for work, that you needed a position and a place to stay. He made it sound like you were seeking employment of your own free will. But the way you are sitting there, the way you will not meet my eyes for more than a second, that tells me a different story." Rose said nothing. What could she say? The truth would only complicate matters, and she had nowhere else to go. Fletcher pulled out the other chair and sat down across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Did Ben Carter sell you to me?" The directness of the question startled her into meeting his gaze. His eyes held no judgment, only a calm steadiness that made her want to trust him, though she had learned long ago that trust was a luxury she could not afford. "He told me you had paid for a year of my labor, sir." "That is not what I asked. Did he sell you?" "Did you have any say in this arrangement?" Rose's throat tightened. "I have never had any say in anything, sir." Fletcher's jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the dusty street below. Rose remained frozen in her chair, uncertain whether she had said too much or not enough. After what felt like an eternity, he turned back to her. "Come with me," he said. "Where are we going, sir?" "To have a conversation with Ben Carter." The general store occupied the first floor of the building, its shelves stocked with goods for the ranchers and townspeople of Pinon. Ben Carter stood behind the counter, a portly man with greasy hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. That smile faltered when Fletcher came down the stairs with Rose behind him. "Mr. Owens, I trust everything is satisfactory," Carter began, but Fletcher cut him off. "How much?" "I beg your pardon. How much did I pay you for Rose Sullivan's labor?" Carter's eyes darted between them. We agreed on $100 for a year's work, plus I waived the debt she owed for room and board these past 2 months. So you are telling me that you sold this woman to me for $100. Now see here, it is not like that at all. She is free to leave whenever she wants, but she has nowhere to go and no means to support herself. I was doing her a kindness by finding her a position. Fletcher reached into his vest and pulled out a leather wallet. He extracted several bills and placed them on the counter. That is $120. 20 more than I paid you. Give it to Rose. Carter's mouth fell open. What? Why would I? Because you just sold her to me, and I am immediately reselling her freedom back to her for every cent I paid, plus profit for your trouble. Fletcher's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it. Now give her the money. This is absurd. The arrangement was Fletcher's hand moved to rest on the grip of his revolver. He did not draw it, did not even threaten to, but the gesture was clear enough. Give her the money, Carter. Every dollar. With shaking hands, Carter counted out the bills and held them toward Rose. She stared at the money as though it were a snake that might strike her. Fletcher nodded encouragingly, and slowly she reached out and took the cash. There, Fletcher said. Rose Sullivan, you are now in possession of $120, which I believe makes you the wealthiest woman in Pinyon at this precise moment. You have enough money to buy a stagecoach ticket to anywhere you want to go, with plenty left over for a fresh start. Rose looked down at the money in her hands, then up at Fletcher's face, searching for the trap. There had to be a trap. Men did not simply give women their freedom. They did not pay money to release them from obligation. I do not understand, she whispered. It is quite simple. You do not belong to me. You do not belong to Carter or anyone else. You are free to make your own choices. Fletcher turned toward the door, then paused. However, I do genuinely need help at my ranch. I have been running it alone for 3 years, and I am drowning in work. If you want a real job, with fair wages and respectful treatment, then the offer stands. You would have your own quarters in the ranch house, 3 meals a day and $30 a month. You would be free to leave whenever you chose. But if you would rather take that money and start over somewhere else, I will understand completely and wish you well. He walked out into the bright New Mexico sunshine, leaving Rose standing in the general store with more money in her hands than she had ever possessed, and a choice she had never been permitted to make. Carter muttered something under his breath about crazy cowboys and returned to organizing his inventory, clearly dismissing her now that she was no longer his concern. Rose walked slowly to the door and looked out. Fletcher had untied his horse from the hitching post, a beautiful buckskin gelding with a black mane and tail, and was preparing to mount. She thought about Sacramento, San Francisco, maybe even Denver. Cities where she could disappear into the crowds, where no one knew her history. She thought about the weight of the money in her hand and how quickly it would disappear once she had to pay for food and lodging and everything else she would need. But more than any of that, she thought about the way Fletcher Owens had looked at her. Not with desire or disgust, but with respect. As though she were a person whose thoughts and feelings mattered. "Mr. Owens," she called out, stepping into the street. He turned, his hand on the saddle horn, waiting. "I would like to accept your job offer if it still stands." Something that might have been relief crossed his features. "It stands. Gather whatever belongings you have. We will stop by the mercantile to get you some proper work clothes and supplies, then head to the ranch." Rose went back inside, climbed the stairs to her sparse room, and collected her meager possessions: 2 dresses, one of them badly stained, a brush with half its bristles missing, and a small silver locket that had belonged to her mother. Everything fit into a cloth bag that she could carry in one hand. When she came back down, Fletcher was waiting with 2 horses. the buckskin gelding he had been riding, and a pretty sorrel mare with a white blaze on her face. "This is Juniper," Fletcher said, gesturing to the mare. "She is gentle and steady. Do you know how to ride?" "A little. The cattle baron I worked for sometimes had me help move stock between pastures." Fletcher helped her into the saddle, his hands impersonal and respectful as he adjusted the stirrups to fit her shorter legs. Then they rode together through the small town of Piñon, stopping at a mercantile different from Carter's store. Fletcher seemed to know the proprietor, a kind-faced Mexican woman named Mrs. Delgado, who clucked her tongue sympathetically when she heard Rose needed an entirely new wardrobe for ranch work. "You come with me, Mija," Mrs. Delgado said, leading Rose to the back of the store where ready-made clothing hung on racks and shelves. "Fletcher Owens is a good man. His wife, Elena, she was my cousin's daughter. When she died 3 years ago, we all worried he would lose himself to grief. But he kept working, kept taking care of those horses. He will treat you well." The mention of a dead wife explained some things, Rose thought. The sadness that seemed to linger behind Fletcher's eyes, perhaps. The fact that he needed help at his ranch. Mrs. Delgado outfitted her with practical split skirts for riding, sturdy cotton blouses, a warm jacket for cool evenings, a wide-brimmed hat to protect her from the sun, and good leather boots. Fletcher paid for everything without comment, waving away Rose's attempt to contribute from her newfound cash. "Save your money," he told her. "You earned it back in that room above Carter's store, I have no doubt. Consider the clothes a signing bonus." As they rode north out of Piñon, the landscape opened up into rolling hills covered with piñon pines and juniper trees, punctuated by red rock formations that glowed in the afternoon sun. The air smelled of dust and sage, and something indefinably wild that made Rose's heart beat faster. She had spent most of her life in building saloons, ranch houses, hotels always enclosed, always contained. Out here, the sky stretched endlessly overhead, and she could see for miles in every direction. "The ranch is called the Broken Bit," Fletcher said as they rode. "I started it 5 years ago with my wife. We had big dreams planned to breed the finest quarter horses in the territory. Elena was better with the animals than I was. She had a gift for understanding what they needed, what they were thinking. After she died, I almost sold everything and left. But I could not abandon what we had built together, so I kept going one day at a time." "How did she die?" Rose asked, then immediately regretted the question. "I am sorry, that was too personal. No, it is all right. Childbirth. The baby died to a little girl. We had already picked out a name. Lucia." His voice remained steady, but Rose could hear the old pain underneath it. "The doctor said sometimes these things just happen, that there was nothing anyone could have done differently. That does not make it any easier to accept." They rode in silence for a while after that. The only sounds the steady clopping of hooves and the cry of a hawk circling overhead. Rose found herself stealing glances at Fletcher, studying the way he sat his horse with effortless grace, the way his hands were gentle on the reins, the way he scanned the horizon constantly, always aware of his surroundings. He was handsome in a weathered, unpolished way, but that was not what drew her attention. It was the fundamental decency she sensed in him, the kindness that had prompted him to demand her freedom from Ben Carter even though it cost him money and gained him nothing. "Why did you do it?" she finally asked. "Why did you make Carter give me that money?" Fletcher considered the question carefully before answering. "My father was a good man in many ways, but he had what he called business arrangements with women over the years. He would pay them for their time, their labor, sometimes their bodies. He convinced himself that because money changed hands, it was all fair and square. But I saw how those women looked, the emptiness in their eyes, the way they flinched when he raised his voice. That is not a business arrangement. That is ownership, and no human being should ever own another. Not everyone sees it that way. No, they do not. But I do. And I could not in good conscience bring you to my ranch under the terms Carter had arranged. I needed you to have a real choice, even if that choice meant you walked away. But you need help at the ranch. What would you have done if I had left? He shrugged. Kept struggling along on my own, I suppose, or found someone else to hire under proper terms. But at least I would have been able to sleep at night knowing I had not perpetuated the kind of system that treats women like livestock. The Broken Bit Ranch came into view as they crested a rise, a sturdy adobe ranch house with a covered porch, a large barn and several corrals, and what looked like at least 30 horses grazing in the surrounding pastures. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow even in the summer heat. A creek ran through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided blessed shade. It was beautiful in a harsh, uncompromising way, and Rose felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or the possibility of it. Fletcher showed her to her room, a small but clean space with whitewashed walls, a real bed with a quilted coverlet, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. Compared to the cramped, dingy quarters she had occupied above Carter's store, it felt like a palace. Take some time to settle in, Fletcher said. Supper will be in about an hour. Nothing fancy. I am afraid my cooking skills are limited to beans, bacon, and whatever else I can manage not to burn. But it will fill your stomach. After he left, Rose sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. This was hers. For as long as she worked here, this space belonged to her. No one would come through that door without permission. No one would demand things from her that she was not willing to give. The reality of it felt fragile, like a soap bubble that might pop if she breathed too hard. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging the new clothes in the small wardrobe, and placing her mother's locket carefully on the washstand where she could see it. Then she washed the dust of travel from her face and hands, changed into one of the new blouses and split skirts, and made her way to the kitchen. Fletcher was true to his word about his cooking abilities. He had managed to produce a meal of beans flavored with bacon and onions, fresh tortillas that he admitted he had gotten from a neighbor, and strong coffee. They ate at a simple wooden table, and Rose found herself relaxing slightly as Fletcher talked about the ranch, the horses, what her duties would entail. Most of the work right now is basic horse care, he explained. Feeding, watering, mucking out stalls, checking for injuries or illness. I have contracts to deliver 3 trained saddle horses to a ranch near Albuquerque in 2 months, so I will be doing most of the training work. But I need someone to handle the daily maintenance so I can focus on that. Eventually, if you are interested and have the aptitude, I could teach you about horse training. Elena always said 2 people working with a horse learned faster than 1 person alone. I would like that, Rose said. I have never been around horses much, but I have always admired them. They are honest creatures, Fletcher said. They will not lie to you or pretend to be something they are not. If a horse trusts you, you have earned it. If a horse fears you, you need to change your behavior. It is refreshing compared to human interactions, where people hide their true intentions behind pleasant words. Over the next few days, Rose discovered that ranch work was harder than anything she had done before, but also more satisfying. She woke before dawn to help Fletcher feed the horses, hauling buckets of grain and flakes of hay to the various corrals and pastures. She learned to muck out stalls efficiently, to check hooves for stones or signs of thrush, to recognize when a horse was feeling off even if there were no obvious symptoms. Her muscles ached from the unaccustomed labor, but it was a clean ache, earned through honest work, and she found she did not mind it. Fletcher proved to be a patient teacher, explaining everything clearly, and never making her feel stupid when she made mistakes. He worked alongside her rather than simply giving orders, and Rose noticed that he always took on the hardest or dirtiest tasks himself. In the evenings, after supper, he would sometimes play a battered guitar and sing old cowboy songs in a rough but pleasant baritone. He never asked about her past, never pried into her history, and Rose was grateful for that mercy. But despite the respect he showed her, Rose found herself constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. No man had ever been kind to her without expecting something in return. So when Fletcher asked her one evening if she would mind helping him with a particularly difficult horse the next day, she felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety. "What do you need me to do?" she asked carefully. "Just stand at the fence and talk to me while I work with him." His name is Thunder, and he was abused by his previous owner. He is terrified of humans, especially men. I have been trying to gentle him for months, but he needs to learn that not all people will hurt him. I thought if he saw me interacting calmly with you, heard normal human conversation that did not involve shouting or violence, it might help him relax. Rose blinked. "You just want me to talk to you. If you are comfortable doing so. If not, you could read aloud from a book or even just hum." It is the sound of calm human voices he needs to hear. The next morning, Rose positioned herself at the corral fence while Fletcher worked with Thunder, a massive dark bay gelding with scars on his flanks and a white-rimmed eye that spoke of deep fear. Fletcher moved with infinite patience, never approaching directly, never making sudden movements. He talked in a low, steady voice about nothing in particular: the weather, the other horses, what he planned to plant in the garden next spring. "Tell me about Pignon," he said to Rose after a while. "What did you think of the town?" Rose hesitated, then began to talk about what she had observed during their brief time there. The dusty streets, the mix of Anglo and Mexican residents, the way the shopkeepers called out greetings to each other. As she spoke, she noticed that Thunder's ears were flicking back and forth, listening. The horse was still pressed against the far side of the corral, but he was not actively trying to escape anymore. "Keep talking," Fletcher encouraged. "He is starting to settle." So Rose kept talking. She told him about the pretty church she had seen at the edge of town, about Mrs. Delgado's kindness, about the children she had seen playing with a hoop in the street. And as she spoke, Fletcher continued his slow, patient work with Thunder, gradually closing the distance between them while the horse learned that humans could be calm and predictable. By the end of 2 hours, Fletcher had managed to touch Thunder's shoulder, the lightest brush of his fingers against the scarred hide. The horse trembled but did not bolt. Fletcher immediately stepped back, rewarding the small gesture of trust by giving the horse space. "That is enough for today," he said, climbing over the fence to stand beside Rose. "In a few more weeks, I think he will let me put a halter on him. In a few months, maybe someone will be able to ride him again." "You have incredible patience," Rose said. Fletcher wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "Patience is all you can have with a traumatized creature. Pushing too hard only makes things worse. The healing happens slowly, on their timeline, not ours." He paused, then added, "I imagine the same is true for people." Rose met his eyes and saw understanding there. He knew she was like Thunder in some ways, scarred, afraid, waiting for the next blow to fall. But he was giving her space to heal at her own pace, just as he was doing with the horse. The realization made her throat tight with emotion. That evening, as they ate another simple meal together, Fletcher said, I need to make a supply run to Santa Fe next week. It is a 2-day ride there, a day in the city and 2 days back. Would you be comfortable staying here alone, taking care of the horses? Or would you prefer to come with me? It was another choice, Rose realized. Another opportunity to decide for herself what she wanted. She thought about it carefully. I think I would like to stay here if you trust me to handle things. I trust you completely. You have learned fast and work hard. The horses will be in good hands. The following week, Fletcher left for Santa Fe, riding out before dawn with his saddlebags packed and a rifle in his saddle scabbard in case of trouble on the trail. Rose stood on the porch and watched him go, and for the first time in her life, she was alone in a place that felt like it could become a home. The days passed in a rhythm of work and quiet satisfaction. Rose fed the horses, cleaned stalls, checked the water troughs, and spent hours watching thunder from outside his corral, talking softly to him the way Fletcher had taught her. The horse was still skittish, but she noticed that his ears swiveled toward her when she spoke, and once he took 3 steps in her direction before losing his nerve and retreating to the far fence. On the evening of the 3rd day, Rose was cooking supper when she heard the sound of approaching horses. She felt a spike of fear. Fletcher was not supposed to be back until tomorrow, but when she looked out the window, she saw him riding up to the barn with a packhorse laden with supplies trailing behind. He looked exhausted, dust-covered and swaying slightly in the saddle. Rose went out to meet him, and he gave her a weary smile. I pushed hard to get back early, he said, dismounting stiffly. I kept worrying something would go wrong here and you would need help. Everything is fine, Rose assured him. The horses are all healthy and fed. Thunder even came a little closer to me this afternoon. That is good news. Fletcher started to unsaddle his horse, but Rose stopped him. Go inside and rest. I will take care of the horses. You have already done a full day's work, and you have been riding for 2 days straight. Please, let me help. For a moment, she thought he would argue, but then he nodded gratefully and headed toward the house. By the time Rose had tended to both horses and brought in the supplies from the packhorse, Fletcher had washed up and was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. He looked more alert now, though still tired. Thank you, he said simply, for taking care of things here and for taking care of the horses just now. I am not accustomed to having help, to having someone I can rely on. You gave me a reason to be reliable, Rose said. You treated me like a person whose efforts mattered. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went beyond employer and employee. They were 2 wounded people learning to trust again, finding solid ground in each other's company. As summer turned toward autumn, Rose found herself thinking less about her past and more about her future. She had been at the broken bit for 3 months, and Fletcher had paid her promptly at the end of each month, pressing the coins into her hand with a reminder that she had earned every cent. Combined with the money from Ben Carter, she now had enough saved to truly start over somewhere if she wanted to. But the thought of leaving filled her with an ache she did not want to examine too closely. The truth was that she was happy here. Happy in a way she had not known was possible. She loved the work, loved the horses, loved the vast open landscape that made her feel like she could finally breathe fully. And she loved the quiet, steady presence of Fletcher Owens, though she hardly dared admit that even to herself. Fletcher had been unfailingly respectful, keeping a professional distance even as they grew more comfortable with each other. But sometimes Rose caught him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, and sometimes their hands would brush when they were working together, and she would feel a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with possibility. One October evening, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson when Fletcher said, "Rose, I need to tell you something." Her heart started to pound. This was it, she thought. The moment when he would reveal his true intentions, when the kindness would be revealed as a long manipulation designed to make her lower her guard. "When I first brought you here," Fletcher continued, "I told myself I was simply helping someone in need, that I was being a decent human being by giving you a real choice about your own life. And that was true. But over these past months, I have come to care about you in ways that go beyond employer and employee. I find myself thinking about you when I should be concentrating on work. I look forward to our evenings together more than I probably should. And I need you to know that these feelings are mine to manage, not yours to reciprocate or worry about. You are safe here regardless of how you feel about me. Your job is secure. Your place here is secure. I am telling you this only because I cannot in good conscience continue to pretend that I see you only as an employee when the truth is that I am falling in love with you." Rose stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You are falling in love with me?" "Yes. But I need you to understand that I expect nothing from you. You have spent your whole life with men who felt entitled to your time, your labor, your body. I will never be one of those men. If you want to continue working here exactly as we have been, with nothing changing between us, that is absolutely acceptable. If you want to leave because my feelings make you uncomfortable, I will pay for your stagecoach ticket and give you excellent references. And if, by some miracle, you find that you have feelings for me too, then we can explore what that might mean slowly and carefully, with you in control of how things progress. But whatever you decide, you need to know one thing above all else: you belong to yourself, Rose Sullivan. You have always belonged to yourself, and you always will." Tears were streaming down Rose's face before she even realized she was crying. All her life men had told her what she was worth, what she owed them. Fletcher was the first man who had ever told her that she belonged to herself, that her choices mattered, that she had the power to determine her own future. "I do not know how to do this," she said through her tears. "I do not know how to be with someone who actually cares about what I want. Every relationship I have ever had has been a transaction, a negotiation, a power dynamic where I had no power. I do not know what real love looks like." Fletcher reached over slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and gently took her hand. "Then we will figure it out together. There is no rush, no pressure. We can take all the time you need to learn how to trust this, how to trust me, how to trust yourself." Rose looked down at their joined hands, his weathered and calloused from hard work, hers finally starting to develop the same kind of honest wear. "I think I might be falling in love with you too," she whispered, "but I am terrified." "That is understandable. I am a little terrified too, if I am being honest. I loved my wife so much, and when I lost her, I thought I would never feel anything like that again. The idea of opening my heart to someone new, of risking that kind of pain again, it is frightening. But I have learned that fear is not a good enough reason to avoid living." They sat together on the porch as the stars emerged overhead, hands intertwined, talking quietly about what they both wanted from life. Rose spoke about dreams she had barely allowed herself to acknowledge: the desire for a real home, for work that meant something, for a partner who saw her as an equal. Fletcher talked about his hope to build the broken bit into something lasting, about wanting children someday if he could find someone who wanted to share that journey, about the simple pleasure of sharing his life with someone who understood him. As the night grew cold, they went inside, and Fletcher built up the fire in the stone fireplace. They sat together on the worn sofa, Rose tucked against Fletcher's side with his arm around her shoulders, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. There was no expectation of more, No pressure for things to progress faster than Rose was ready for. Just two people learning to be together, to trust each other, to believe that something good and real could exist between them. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened slowly and carefully. Fletcher courted Rose the way people did in old-fashioned stories, with respect, with small, thoughtful gestures, with patience. He brought her wildflowers from the hillsides. He taught her to ride better, taking her on long sunset rides through the beautiful New Mexico landscape. He listened when she talked about her past, never judging, never pitying, just witnessing her story and accepting all of it. Rose found herself blossoming under this kind of steady, respectful affection. The haunted look gradually faded from her eyes, replaced by something brighter. She laughed more easily. She stood straighter. She began to believe that she really could belong to herself, that she really was worthy of love and respect. Thunder improved too, as though the horse could sense the healing happening in Rose. By November, Fletcher was able to halter him and lead him around the corral. By December, Thunder allowed brushing and hoof care. The day Fletcher gently placed a saddle on Thunder's back without the horse panicking was a day of celebration at the broken bit. "You did this," Fletcher told Rose as they watched Thunder standing calmly with the saddle on. "Your voice, your presence, your patience," he associated all of that with safety. "You helped him learn to trust again." "We both helped him," Rose corrected. "Just like we are both helping each other." Winter in northern New Mexico brought cold nights and occasional snow, but the ranch house stayed cozy with the fire burning and good food on the table. Rose had taken over most of the cooking, discovering that she actually enjoyed creating meals when she was doing it by choice rather than by command. Fletcher proved to be an appreciative audience, praising even her simple stews and roasts. On Christmas Eve, Fletcher surprised her with a gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal and a pen. "I thought you might want to write down your thoughts, your experiences," he said. "You are living a new chapter of your life. It seems worth documenting." Rose opened the journal to the first blank page, running her fingers over the smooth paper. "I would not know where to start." "Start with today. Start with this moment. Start with whatever feels true." That night, after Fletcher had gone to bed, Rose sat by the firelight and wrote her first entry. "Today I realized that I am happy. Truly happy, for perhaps the first time in my life. I have work that fulfills me, a home that feels safe, and a man who loves me without trying to own me. This is what freedom feels like. This is what belonging to myself means." As winter turned toward spring in 1879, Rose and Fletcher's relationship continued to deepen. Their first kiss happened on a mild February afternoon while they were working together to repair a section of fence. Fletcher had said something that made Rose laugh, and when she looked up at him, he was smiling down at her with such open affection that she acted on impulse, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle and sweet, and when they pulled apart, Fletcher cupped her face in his hands. "I want to marry you, Rose Sullivan. Not today, not until you are ready, but someday. I want to spend my life with you, building this ranch together, building a family together. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. Will you think about it?" Rose's answer came without hesitation. "I will marry you, Fletcher Owens. I do not need more time to think about it. I know what I want, and I want you. I want this life we are creating together." Fletcher kissed her again, deeper this time, and Rose felt a sense of rightness settle into her bones. This was what love was supposed to feel like: partnership, respect, mutual desire, and the freedom to choose each other every single day. They were married in April in the small church in Pinon, with Mrs. Delgado and a few neighboring ranchers as witnesses. Rose wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Delgado had helped her make, and Fletcher wore his best suit with his hair neatly trimmed. When the priest asked if she came to this marriage of her own free will, Rose's voice rang out clear and strong. "I do." Their wedding night was everything Rose had hoped it could be: tender and passionate, with Fletcher constantly checking that she was comfortable, that she wanted to continue, that every touch was welcomed. For the first time in her life, Rose experienced intimacy as something beautiful rather than something to be endured. She cried afterward, not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming relief of finally understanding what she had been missing all those years. "I love you," she told Fletcher as they lay tangled together in the darkness. "I did not think I would ever be able to say those words and mean them, but I do. I love you so much. I love you too, Rose Owens." He emphasized her new surname with a smile. "And I promise to spend every day showing you that love, in ways big and small, for as long as we both live." They spent the next year building their life together at the Broken Bit. Rose took on more responsibility with the horse training, discovering that she had Fletcher's same patient approach and gift for reading the animals. Together, they developed a reputation for rehabilitating difficult horses, and ranchers from across the territory began bringing them challenging cases. The work was hard but rewarding, and the ranch began to turn a real profit. Thunder became Rose's particular project and triumph. By the autumn of 1879, she had him fully gentled and trained as a riding horse. The first time she climbed into the saddle and Thunder calmly walked around the corral with her on his back, Fletcher whooped with joy and pride. Thunder would never be a horse for just anyone. He remained nervous around strangers, especially men, but with Rose, he was gentle as a lamb. In the spring of 1880, Rose discovered she was pregnant. The news brought a complicated mix of emotions. She was thrilled at the thought of having a child with Fletcher, but she was also terrified, remembering what had happened to Alina. Fletcher noticed her fear and held her close. "I will not lie and tell you that everything will be fine," he said quietly. "I do not have the power to promise that. But I can promise that we will face whatever comes together, and we will get you the best care possible. We will go to Santa Fe if we need to, stay there for the last month so you are close to a good doctor." True to his word, as Rose's pregnancy progressed, Fletcher made careful preparations. He found a reputable doctor in Santa Fe and arranged for them to rent a room near his office for the final weeks before the baby was due. He hired a young man named Jack to help maintain the ranch while they were away, and he never once let Rose see his own fear, though she knew it must be there. Their son was born on a crisp November morning in 1880, after a labor that was long and exhausting but ultimately uncomplicated. Fletcher held Rose's hand through all of it, wiping her forehead with cool cloths and telling her how strong she was, how proud he was, how much he loved her. When the doctor finally placed the squalling infant in Rose's arms, she looked down at the tiny red face and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "What should we name him?" Fletcher asked, gently touching the baby's small hand. Rose thought of everything she had been through, everything that had led her to this moment. She thought of how Fletcher had given her back herself, and how together they were creating something entirely new. What about Samuel? It means heard by God. All those years when I thought no one was listening to my prayers, maybe someone was after all. Maybe I just needed to get here to realize it. Samuel Owens, Fletcher said, testing the name. "I like it. Samuel Fletcher Owens." They stayed in Santa Fe for 2 more weeks, making sure Rose and the baby were both healthy and strong before making the journey back to the Broken Bit. When they finally arrived home, Jack had kept everything running smoothly, and the horses nickered greetings as though welcoming their family back. Rose had never imagined she could feel so complete. She had a husband who cherished her, a healthy son, a home she loved, and work that gave her purpose. The life she had now was so far removed from the one she had lived 2 years ago that it seemed like it must have happened to someone else. As Samuel grew from an infant into a curious toddler, Rose found joy in watching him discover the world. He took his first steps in the barn, holding onto a stall door for balance while the horses looked on with what seemed like patient interest. His first clear word was "Mama," followed shortly by "Dada," and then, inevitably, "Horse." Fletcher was a devoted father, spending hours playing with Samuel, teaching him about the ranch, carrying him on his shoulders during evening walks. Rose loved watching the two of them together, seeing the gentleness in Fletcher that extended to every living creature in his care. The broken bit continued to thrive. By 1882, they had expanded their operation, building additional corrals and a second barn. They employed 3 ranch hands to help with the increased workload, and Rose had established herself as one of the finest horse trainers in the territory. People came from as far away as Texas and Arizona to buy horses trained by Rose Owens, knowing they were getting animals that were patient, well-mannered, and responsive. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, Fletcher and Rose took a rare evening away from the ranch, leaving Samuel with Mrs. Delgado and riding up into the hills to watch the sunset. They sat together on a rocky outcropping, Fletcher's arms around Rose, looking out over the land that had become their kingdom. "You remember what I told you the day we met?" Fletcher asked. "That you belong to yourself." "I remember every word you said that day. It changed my entire life." "I want to amend that statement slightly, if I may. You belong to yourself, Rose, but you also belong here with me, with Samuel, with these horses and this land. Not because anyone owns you or has claim to you, but because you have chosen this life, this place, this family. You belong here in the same way that water belongs in a river or stars belong in the sky, because it is right, because it is where you are meant to be." Rose turned to look at her husband, this man who had seen her at her lowest and most broken, and had chosen to help her rebuild herself. "I used to think freedom meant having no ties, no obligations, nothing that could bind me or control me. But I have learned that real freedom is having the power to choose your own ties, your own obligations. I choose you, Fletcher. I choose this life. I will choose you every single day for the rest of our lives." They made love under the stars that night, on a blanket spread over soft grass, with the cool spring air on their skin and the sound of coyotes singing in the distance. It was wild and passionate and tender all at once, a celebration of everything they had built together and everything they still had ahead of them. In the years that followed, they had 2 more children, a daughter named Alina after Fletcher's first wife, born in 1883, and another son named Thomas, born in 1885. The ranch house rang with the sounds of children's laughter, and Rose discovered that she was a natural mother, patient and loving but also firm when necessary. She taught all 3 children to ride before they could properly walk, and by the time Samuel was 8, he was already helping with basic horse training. Fletcher proved to be just as devoted to Alina and Thomas as he was to Samuel, and Rose loved him even more for his capacity to open his heart again and again. He never compared his new family to the one he had lost, never made Rose feel like she was a replacement for his first wife. Alina's memory was honored but not mourned, and when little Alina asked about the woman she was named after, Fletcher spoke of her with affection and respect, teaching his daughter that love did not have to be divided or diminished, that there was room in the heart for both past and present. The Broken Bit became one of the most successful ranches in northern New Mexico. By 1890, they owned over 100 horses, employed 8 full-time ranch hands, and had contracts with the U.S. Cavalry to provide trained mounts. Rose had become something of a legend in the territory, a woman who could gentle the wildest horse, who treated animals with a combination of firmness and compassion that produced remarkable results. But for all their success and prosperity, what Rose treasured most were the quiet moments with her family. Evenings around the dinner table with everyone sharing stories from their day. Sunday afternoons when they would all pile into the wagon and drive to Pinon for church services and socializing. The way Fletcher still looked at her after 12 years of marriage as though she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The sound of her children's voices calling "Mama" when they needed her. One summer evening in 1891, after the children were asleep, Rose and Fletcher sat on the porch swing together, gently rocking in the warm darkness. Rose leaned her head on Fletcher's shoulder, feeling utterly content. "I never thanked you properly," she said quietly. "For what? For saving me. For seeing me as a person when everyone else saw me as property. For giving me the chance to belong to myself." Fletcher was silent for a moment, then he tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. "Rose, I did not save you. I gave you an opportunity, yes. I refused to participate in a system that dehumanized you, true. But you saved yourself. You were the one who chose to stay and work hard. You were the one who learned to trust again. You were the one who had the courage to open your heart to love after everything you had been through. I was just lucky enough to be the man you chose to love." Tears pricked Rose's eyes. Even after all these years, Fletcher had the power to move her with his words, with his absolute conviction that she was strong and capable and worthy. "I am the lucky one," she said. "I was traded like property my whole life, passed from one man to another, never having a say in my own fate. And then I met a cowboy who looked me in the eye and said, 'From now on, you belong to you.' Those words gave me my life back, Fletcher. Everything good that has happened since then stems from that moment. And look at what you have done with that life," Fletcher said, gesturing to the ranch spread out before them in the moonlight. "You built this with me. You created a home, raised 3 incredible children, established yourself as one of the finest horse trainers in the Southwest. You took the freedom you were given and made something extraordinary out of it." They sat together in comfortable silence, the swing creaking gently, the night air filled with the sound of crickets and the distant whinny of horses. Rose thought about the girl she had been at 22, hollow-eyed and hopeless, certain that her life would never be more than a series of transactions and betrayals. If she could go back and tell that girl what the future held, she would not have believed it. The idea that she could be this happy, this fulfilled, this completely and authentically herself, it would have seemed like an impossible fantasy. But it was real. All of it was real. The ranch, the marriage, the children, the respect she had earned in the community, it was all real and solid and hers. As if reading her thoughts, Fletcher said, "I hope you know how proud I am of you, not just for what you have accomplished, but for who you have become. You took all that pain and trauma from your past and refused to let it define you. You chose to heal, to grow, to love. That takes incredible courage." "I had help," Rose said softly. "I had you. We had each other. That is what marriage is supposed to be, 2 people helping each other become the best versions of themselves." Rose thought of Alina, Fletcher's first wife, and sent a silent thanks out into the universe. Alina had loved this man, had built a life with him, and even though her time had been cut tragically short, she had shaped Fletcher into the kind of man who could love deeply and respect fully. In some strange way, Rose owed her happiness to the woman she had never met. the woman whose loss had taught Fletcher the preciousness of love and the importance of cherishing it while you could. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Samuel grew into a fine young man, tall and steady like his father, with a gift for understanding horses that surpassed even Rose's abilities. Elena became a spirited, intelligent girl who loved reading and learning, who announced at age 10 that she intended to be a veterinarian someday. And neither Rose nor Fletcher told her it was impossible for a woman, because they had both learned that impossible was a relative term. Thomas was the wild child, always getting into scrapes and adventures, keeping his parents on their toes with his boundless energy and curiosity. In 1895, Thunder died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 23. Rose found him in the morning, lying in the pasture he loved best, and she wept for the horse who had been as much a symbol of her healing as a companion. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the ranch, and Fletcher carved a simple headstone, Thunder, who learned to trust again. He was not just a horse, Rose said at the simple graveside ceremony, with her family gathered around. He was proof that broken things could be mended, that trauma did not have to be permanent, that with patience and love and respect, anyone or any creature could find their way back to wholeness. I will miss him. Fletcher put his arm around her. He had a good life here, Rose, a safe life, a peaceful life. That is all any of us can hope for. By the turn of the century in 1900, the broken bit had become an institution in New Mexico. Rose and Fletcher were in their 40s now, their children nearly grown, their hair touched with silver but their love as strong as ever. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal losses. They had celebrated births and mourned deaths. They had worked side by side every single day, building something that would outlast them both. Samuel, at 19, announced that he wanted to expand the ranch's operations into cattle as well as horses, and Fletcher agreed to let him try, giving him a section of land to manage as his own. Elena, at 16, had been accepted to a veterinary college in Colorado, one of the few that would admit women. Thomas, at 14, declared that he wanted to be a writer and chronicled ranch life in detailed journals that his mother secretly hoped would be published someday. On a crisp autumn evening in 1901, Rose and Fletcher celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary with a party that brought together neighbors and friends from miles around. Mrs. Delgado, now quite elderly but still sharp as a tack, made a toast that brought tears to many eyes. 22 years ago, I saw a woman who had been beaten down by life, who had every reason to give up hope. And I saw a man who was drowning in grief, who could have closed his heart forever. But instead, they found each other. They chose to heal together. They built something beautiful, not just this ranch, but a family, a legacy, a love that has inspired everyone who knows them. To Rose and Fletcher Owens, who prove that it is never too late for a new beginning. As everyone raised their glasses, Rose looked around at the assembled faces, neighbors who had become friends, employees who had become family, children who had become adults. This was her community, her people, her life. She had chosen it, and it had chosen her back. Later that night, after all the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Rose and Fletcher walked out to the barn one last time to check on the horses. It had become their nightly ritual, these few minutes together at the end of each day, moving through the familiar tasks in comfortable synchronicity. You ever think about how different your life would have been if you had never come to Pinion? Rose asked as she ran her hand along the neck of a young mare. Every day, Fletcher said honestly. If Ben Carter had not sent word that he had someone who needed work, if I had not made that ride into town, If I had not seen through his lies about you choosing to be there, any of those things being different would have changed everything. I would have missed out on the greatest blessing of my life. I might have ended up in California, or dead in some alley, or married to some other man who saw me as property. But none of those things happened. You ended up here with me, and we built this life together. That is what matters. Rose finished checking the last horse and closed the stall door. Fletcher took her hand as they walked back toward the house. Their steps matched after so many years of walking together. "From now on, you belong to you," Rose said softly, repeating the words that had changed her life so long ago. "I have never forgotten that, Fletcher, not for a single day. You gave me myself, and that was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." "You gave me a reason to live again," Fletcher replied. "After Alina died, I was just going through the motions, existing but not really living. You reminded me that life could still hold joy and purpose and love. We saved each other, Rose. That is the truth of it." They stood together on the porch, looking out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. Rose thought about the long, winding road that had brought her here, all the pain and degradation, all the times she had been treated as less than human, all the moments when she had wanted to give up. She thought about the day Fletcher Owens had walked into that room above Ben Carter's store and changed the trajectory of her entire existence with his refusal to participate in her oppression. She thought about the life they had built together, brick by brick, moment by moment, choice by choice. The ranch, the children, the horses, the quiet everyday intimacy of a marriage between equals. It was not always easy. They had disagreements and difficulties like any couple, but it was real and honest and true. She belonged to herself, and she had chosen to share that self with Fletcher Owens. That made all the difference. "I love you," she said, the same words she had spoken thousands of times before, but they never grew old or lost their meaning. "I love you too," Fletcher replied, kissing her gently, "until my last breath and beyond." They went inside together, closing the door on another day at the broken bit, another day of the beautiful, ordinary life they had created together. And if Rose's last thought before falling asleep was a prayer of gratitude for the cowboy who had seen her humanity when no one else did, well, that seemed fitting. After all, some people got lucky enough to find their savior, their partner, and their great love all in the same person. Rose Sullivan Owens had been one of those people, and she never, ever took it for granted. Years later, when Rose was in her 60s and Fletcher was showing his age with a limp from an old riding injury, they would sit together on that same porch and watch their grandchildren play in the yard. Samuel had married a local girl and given them 3 grandchildren. Alina had become a veterinarian just as she had promised and worked alongside her parents at the ranch, treating not just their horses but animals from all over the territory. Thomas had indeed become a writer, publishing several successful novels about the Old West that were praised for their authenticity and heart. On a warm June evening in 1915, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Rose rested her head on Fletcher's shoulder and felt a bone-deep contentment. They were old now, their bodies weathered by decades of hard work, but their love had only grown stronger with time. "We did well, did we not?" Fletcher said quietly. "We did better than well. We did wonderfully. I know I do not say it enough anymore, but I want you to know marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." Rose lifted her head to look at him, this man who had been her rescuer, her partner, her lover, her best friend for 36 years. His hair was white now, his face lined, but his eyes still held that same steadiness, that same fundamental decency that had drawn her to him from the very beginning. "You told me once that I belonged to myself," Rose said, And you were right. But I also belong here with you, with this family we created, with this land we have worked and loved. Not because anyone owns me, but because I choose it. Every single day I choose you and this life. And I would make that choice 1,000 times over. Fletcher took her hand and kissed it, a gesture that had become habit over the decades but never lost its tenderness. Then, we are the luckiest two people who ever lived. As darkness fell and the stars emerged overhead, Rose and Fletcher sat together in the peaceful silence of a life well lived. The broken bit would continue long after they were gone, passed down through their children and grandchildren, a legacy of love and respect and hard work. But more than the ranch itself, what would endure was the example they had set of what it meant to see another person's humanity, to offer freedom instead of control, to build a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Rose Sullivan had been traded like property her whole life, until the day a cowboy named Fletcher Owens looked her in the eye and said those life-changing words. "From now on, you belong to you." And in choosing to belong to herself, she had found everything she had never dared to dream of: a home, a family, a love that transformed her from a woman who had been broken by life into a woman who was whole and strong and free. That was the story Rose told her grandchildren when they asked how she and their grandfather had met. She told them about the hard years before, about the day her life changed, about the patient building of trust and love. She told them so they would understand that everyone deserved to belong to themselves, that real love was about respect and choice and freedom, that broken things could be mended with enough patience and care. And when Rose Owens died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, with Fletcher holding her hand and her children and grandchildren gathered around, her last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. She had been given a gift that so many never received: the chance to live life on her own terms, to love and be loved as an equal, to die knowing that she had mattered, that her life had meant something, that she had left the world better than she found it. Fletcher followed her a year later, his heart finally giving out after decades of faithful service. They were buried side by side on the hillside overlooking the broken bit, not far from where thunder rested. Their headstone was simple: Fletcher Owens, 1850–1916, and Rose Owens, 1856–1934. Beloved husband and wife, parents and grandparents. They belonged to each other, but anyone who had known them understood that the headstone did not tell the real story. The real story was about freedom and choice and the transformative power of love. It was about a woman who reclaimed her own life, and a man who had the wisdom to help her do it. It was about building something beautiful out of broken pieces, about choosing hope over despair, about refusing to let the cruelty of the world destroy your capacity for tenderness. The broken bit continues to this day, still owned and operated by descendants of Rose and Fletcher Owens. The current generation may not remember all the details of how their great-great-grandparents met, but they know the essential truth: that their family legacy began with an act of liberation, with one person recognizing another's fundamental humanity and refusing to participate in her oppression. That legacy of respect, of seeing each person as worthy of dignity and choice, has been passed down through the generations, shaping the family into what it is today. On the porch of the ranch house, where Rose and Fletcher spent so many evenings together, there hangs a simple wooden sign. The words are carved deep, worn smooth by wind and time, but still legible: "You belong to you." It is a reminder, a promise, a declaration of the values that built this place. Every person who enters the broken bit sees those words and is reminded that freedom is not just the absence of chains, but the presence of choice. That love is not about possession, but about partnership. That every human being has inherent worth that cannot be bought or sold or traded. This is the legacy of Rose and Fletcher Owens. Not just the successful ranch, not just the children and grandchildren who carry their blood, but the idea that transformed them, both the revolutionary notion that people belong to themselves, and that real love only flourishes in the soil of freedom and mutual respect. It is a legacy worth preserving, worth honoring, worth passing down through the ages. Because in a world that too often treats people as property, as objects, as means to an end, the reminder that we all belong to ourselves is not just important, it is essential. Rose Sullivan had been traded like property her whole life. Fletcher Owens said, "From now on, you belong to you." And in those words, both of them found salvation, redemption, and a love that would echo through generations. A testament to what humans can accomplish when they choose to see each other truly, to honor each other fully, and to love each other completely. Their story is not just a romance, it is a blueprint for how we all should live, love, and treat one another. And that makes it a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth carrying forward into whatever future awaits.